You know, I don't live in fear. I don't let legislations and politicians dictate my happiness. You know what I mean? They can throw me in a jail cell. They can tell me that I'm not a woman or a woman enough, but it's not going to stop who I am.
Hi, my name is Peter Knegt, and I am here with Kristen Lovell, the co-director and really one of the subjects of the incredible new documentary, The Stroll. Kristen, welcome to Toronto, and thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I guess to start things off for people that are unaware, what is The Stroll?
Well, the Stroll is an area in New York City's Meatpacking district. Historically, it's in a place where trans women have congregated to engage in sex work, or survival sex work for that matter, because in the time frame in which the film takes place, you know, there weren't a lot of employment opportunities or the level of acceptance and visibility that we have today.
The minute I got off on 14th Street, you could hear the clickety-clack of the hills.
The life, the light, the shadows.
We called 14th Street The Stroll, and that was our turf.
Some people choose sex work because they want to. Being a trans woman in the 80s, a lot of us did not have a choice.
And you talk a little bit in the film about how you had an experience being a subject of the film, I think 10 or 15 years ago, and that was one of the catalysts for you to, you really didn't feel like your story was being told in the way you wanted it to, so you set out essentially to make this film. Do you want to talk a little bit about the journey from that sort of lightbulb moment to actually making this film with your co-director, Zachary Drucker?
I think the light bulb was when I was approached to be a part of the documentaries. At the time, I was a very feral woman. As I was saying, I was dealing with survival sex work and homelessness and just trying to figure out my place in the world. When I was approached about the documentary, I was in the process of trying to have some semblance of a life, to clean up, and get off the streets. And I was determined to do that as myself, as the trans woman that I am. And it was hard, it was a long journey. I think, I started, in film by going on auditions just for the sake of going to them. And then eventually I started to get cast. And, I kind of just kept going. I ended up co-producing a film called The Garden Left Behind, and we were in South by Southwest in 2019, and I was at the Whitney Biennial in 2019 where I met my producer, Matt Wolf, and there was a film about, the fight for the peers in the early 2000s, and they showed that film, and I was like, well, there's so much more to that story, though, than just the fight for the peers, the trans woman that lived and sex worked in the area. It's all connected, but there's a bigger story there. And so, I approached Matt about it, and we had multiple meetings, and we decided that we were going to make the film.
And I feel like the film, as you said it says so much about so many things, both sort of specific to the Stroll, but also like representative of so much, like police brutality, the gentrification of not only New York, but many cities around the world. But I found it really illuminating specifically with regard to a couple things. One, RuPaul. I was aware that RuPaul has a shady history when it comes to trans people, but the clip in this film is truly like mind-boggling. Did you know about that clip before you found it?
I didn't. I was in the process of starting the documentary, and I was like, okay, because everything is just so all over the place, right? And it was hard to find like actual video and footage of the area, and I had been collecting stuff for years, and I had, with more trans stuff coming out, and I just, 4 years ago, was just on it, researching and looking, and, in the film I stated, I was researching the wrong term, right? Transgender, that wasn't the word was transvestite. And so when I typed in transvestite, a plethora of information came up, of derogatory terms that were used to identify trans women and trans people. And then there was the RuPaul tape. And, I too was aware of Ru's stance on trans people, especially in regards to their show. And so I just found it so patronizing, and how they were just gallivanting and, through the stroll and like, maybe I'll catch, get a date, And I just found it so disheartening, because at the end of the day, you may be a performer or entertainer, but you have benefited for years off of transness. You know what I mean? And so, patronizing the girls and asking them questions and laughing it off and not paying attention to the more serious elements of life out there.
The one thing that really got me, and I was unaware, is about Amanda Milan, who passed away in 2000. And
she was killed in 2000.
Yes, she was murdered in 2000 with people watching. And you use the example of Matthew Shepard, which is happening around the same time. And, mainstream society sort of rallied around this and made a whole big deal about it, but nothing was discussed about Amanda Milan. In putting that story on the screen for a lot of people to see that maybe weren't aware of it, what do you hope that, queer people who think of themselves as allies, white queer people specifically, or cis queer people, what do you hope they take from that story, and what do you think it can do in terms of like what's happening today?
I worked in a shelter that Sylvia Rivera started before she passed away. And as a young person on the streets, I seen firsthand how the mainstream LGBTQ people treated the T part. We were very vocal about the T being missing, and that there was just the L, G, and the B. I witnessed, profiling or trans profiling from the mainstream community as if we weren't a part of it or we were this other thing. I realized, that had been going on for years. I have this weird perspective now, I like to say. I got to see how it's like seeing the old way and then experiencing all of what we're experiencing today with the increased visibility and basically, trans issues in the living room, And so it was important. I did it for this generation that's coming up now that still don't have a broad sense of their history as a people. I know I didn't when I was coming up. I had to research and learn all of this stuff. The different types of trans people in different cultures and binary, non-binary, So it's been a learning curve throughout the years, we talk about the word transgender versus transvestite. When I was coming up, there was either transsexual or we identify as femme queens. We didn't call ourselves transgenders then. So there's a lot of changes that I've gotten to witness take place. I'm appreciating the fact that, now we're having these nuanced conversations about transness. The struggles and the fights that we've had to endure for decades now are still there in different forms. But we're a resilient community that perseveres through any adversity that's thrown at us, so,
On the one hand, there are films like yours, and I also at Sundance, fictional and non-fictional, Mutt and Kokomo City and Disclosure, which came out a couple years ago. I do feel like trans people are reclaiming their own stories and telling them themselves for really the first time in this kind of mainstream way. But that at the same time, the transphobia that's happening in the mainstream of the right now is really scary, and it seems like it's accelerating in ways that I haven't seen. But do you think that that's kind of that those two things are related? That the fact that yeah,
I really think that the two are related. I think with the increased visibility and recognition and basic human and civil rights has played out into the political sphere, but that's always been, and what I tell young people, is that it's always been like that, though. How Stonewall started was because of a drag ban.
Yeah.
And them policing, gender. That was the reason why Stonewall started. It wasn't because they were gay. It was because they were being non-binary or being forced to be non-binary at that time, because they had that, 2 articles of clothing rule. It was against the law for homosexuals to consume alcohol. That was another reason why they busted up into Stonewall. You know what I mean? So it's like they're always trying to find ways to keep us you know, under the bus.
And, you know, you say in this film that one of the missions that you wanted was to gain control of your own narrative. Do you feel now that this film is out, and I mean, at Sundance, it won a major award for clarity of vision, and it's getting out in the world, not only at film festivals, but soon on HBO and Crave here in Canada. Do you feel like you've gained control? Like, do you feel a sense of of empowerment for what you sought out to seek? Or if that makes sense?
I mean, it's all a little surreal to me now. I'm still trying to process it all. This year came in with a bang. I look at my award and I'm just like, girl, you know?
The trans community has been in survival mode forever. It's important that we all get an opportunity to thrive.
We fought to be where we are.
The system never gave us resources. We created the resources.
I feel like the end of the film is very poetic, and it does end in a sort of a hopeful note in terms of that maybe the greater queer community is catching up a little bit, and maybe there is hope for people working together, and that we maybe will finally learn from these mistakes that are being repeated over and over again. Do you have hope about sort of the future?
Of course.
Yeah?
I do have hope. I've been, you know, like I said, you know, the world was a different place 20 years ago, right? And I mean, I thought I seen the worst of it then, you know? But I don't live in fear. I don't let legislations and politicians dictate my happiness. You know what I mean? I mean, they can throw me in a jail cell. They can tell me that I'm not a woman or a woman enough, but it's not going to stop who I am. You know what I mean? They can try, but, you know.
And I think that's one of the messages of the film. I mean, I think hopefully people will take that from it and from all your future work, I'm sure. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being here. And I hope everybody goes out and sees The Stroll, whether it's at a film festival or on HBO or Crave here in Canada.
Thank you. I'm excited for everyone to see it. Thank you for having me.